computer. Now I have to go back to this one. Say, got it. Sheila's on. Okay, here we go. And we're cooking. Welcome, welcome. Okay.
Are you muted?
I am not muted. They can hear me.
Okay.
Here, I'll even rename myself. I'm right now Beth El Kadima program. Here we go. How about Rabbi Alex? Good. And then why don't we give this the Suffering Sanctuary? Okay. Okay, I'm going to spotlight, but then I'm going to go to gallery view, spotlight for everyone, but then I'm going back to gallery view. Okay, let's do a security.
Your head's looking very big.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. I was told I have a big head. Okay, my wife agrees with you. Okay, thanks for laughing, Paul. And I think we're ready. Here, let me do a mute upon entry so no one embarrasses themselves. Oh, it's already set up. Good job, Chris. Okay, so let's make sure, let's do a sound check. Chris, can you hear me? All right, good. Heidi, you can hear me? Neil?
What did you say?
Johnny Carroll? Oh, hecklers. Okay. And Jay, you can all hear me in here. Let's double check. Sheila, David, Edie, Marlise, Suffering Sanctuary, Paul, give me a thumbs up that you can hear me. Good. A shake is fine. Richard and Ellen, Bob, Shooty, John and Irv, there you both are. Richard and Ellen, Leah and Linda. Okay, we're going to get, you ready to get started? Let's do this. All right. Oh, I'll put this on gallery. Fine. Give me a second. Okay, because you like seeing faces. Here you go. You feel better?
Yeah.
All right, good. Welcome to the next great big tough questions, whatever that is. We have a format. I ramble on for 15, 20, 30 minutes, and then you get to attack me. Tonight's question is, when is it or is it okay to overthrow the government? All right, so, or can you overthrow the government, or the Jewish view of overthrowing the government? So here it goes. You ready? I got a thumbs up. Let's get started. We are Jews. Here's a little secret. Jews have always been the minority people everywhere we went. We're used to it. And as minority people, we almost always have lived under someone else's government. Some of them are good. And guess what? Some of the governments we've been under have been bad. This is not a surprise. We've had lots of governments. Some of the most famous overthrowing government stories would be the Maccabees. Right? The Hanukkah and the Maccabees. Yay, Maccabees. Syrian Greeks, not so great to us. Antiochus, not so great. So the Maccabees, win the war and gain control. So you could definitely call that an overthrowing the government, but it was a government from far away. We were on our home turf. Bar Kokhba, he's another guy who took on a government, and that was the Romans. Now, you don't beat the Romans. You might beat the Syrian Greeks. You might have Hanukkah, but you didn't get another holiday. There would have been another holiday if he won. That's why, if you've never heard of Bar Kokhba before, it's because he lost. So he's like the Maccabees, but he lost. Rabbi Akiva thought he was the Messiah. Was not a good idea for rabbis to get involved in politics. Lost a lot of students during the Omer period. So once upon a time, we did have zealots, right? Zealots would say, we don't support the government that's in charge, and we're going to, fight the power. And guess what happens when you fight the power? Usually you lose because they have power. So one of my favorite guys, now, Neil, you're not going to remember the name, Yochanan ben Zakkai. That's my guy. Yochanan ben Zakkai is the guy, huh?
That's my guy too.
I know.
It's a good pass.
So Yochanan ben Zakkai is that rabbi guy, because they were all rabbis back then. It just meant Mister. But the Yochanan ben Zakkai is the guy who made a deal with the Romans to get out of Jerusalem. He had to leave Jerusalem in a coffin, so it looked like he was dead, and get to a place called Yavna, which was on the coast, and opened up a school. And what we did is we put down our arms, put down our swords, and picked up our pencils, our books. We became scholars. We went from being, bad tuchus mercenaries, You would hire a bunch of Jews to fight a battle. Now you hire a bunch of Jews to do your books, your accounting, but the idea is Yochanan ben Zakkai, it's because of him. Why did he have to sneak out of Jerusalem in a coffin? Not because the Romans would kill him, because the Jews would kill him. He was considered a traitor at the time, right? The Zealots don't believe in making deals with the Romans. We won't fight you. Don't kill us. We'll go study on the coast. And everyone who was left got killed by the Romans. So zealots do not have a long shelf life. It's great to be a zealot, but you don't usually you don't live for a very long time. So when once we cease to be zealots and mercenaries and warriors, right? Abraham, you always picture Abraham as an old guy with a cane and a beard, but Abraham was a warrior. He fought off 4 or 5 kings. Abraham was a warrior, but after Yochanan ben Zakkai, we really did become nerds. We became a pacifist. You might have said pacifist. Like when I turned 18, my father signed me up as a conscientious objector. And then when he wasn't looking, I got rid of it, because, a lot of Jews, are pacifists. We're not Gandhi, but the idea is we're not usually the mercenaries. But what we had to do is be careful. Because we're the minority people among people, we had to be careful because people would accuse us of trying to overthrow their governments. Napoleon, he was good to the Jews, but only after we pledge allegiance to France. If you remember the story of Purim and Haman whispers into that guy, Achashverosh's ears, says, there's a people among you who don't follow your laws. What about Pharaoh? Even Pharaoh says, that Pharaoh says, I have this people among me. They're multiplying. They're going to overthrow me if there's ever a war. We see this King Balak and Balaam throughout the Bible. The fear of the Jew is that we're going to, because we're not one of you, we could overthrow. So it's always been a fear. Probably the greatest hoax for anti-Semites is called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion is a known hoax. It's a fake. It's a document that was disseminated, still disseminated today, written in every language in the world, about how a secret group of Jewish elders of Zion, Jewish leaders, got together about how to overthrow the world, right? To take over the world. So this idea of overthrowing the government is a fear among the anti-Semites. It's right. We control everything. If only. But I love when some guy said, do you control everything? I said, not that I know of. So we had to be careful with that concept of overthrowing because that people have been looking to us today. And by the way, this was I want to say it was in March. In March, there was a newspaper article in Haaretz, an Israeli newspaper. And in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, it reported there is a settler. This is Jews have settled in these settlements, like on the other side of the line in Palestinian territories. There is a settler terror underground. So it's a settler terror underground, Jewish settler terror underground, seeking to overthrow the Israeli government, aiming to destabilize the country and establishing a new regime to be based on Jewish martial law. Right. So when you asked for overthrow the government, you weren't thinking Jews overthrowing Israel, were you? But this was an article in Haaretz, the Israeli, one of the Israeli newspapers, about Jewish settlers who were trying to overthrow the Israeli government. I know as a rabbi, because once upon a time I was a rabbi, as a rabbi, I do a lot of conversions. I think I got 2 more today. And one of the issues is that once you convert someone, you can't take it back, right? That's a thing for rabbis. Once you're Jewish, you're always Jewish. You ever hear that if like someone converts out of Judaism, we don't accept it or something? So once you convert into Judaism, you're always a Jew. So there was a story once of someone who infiltrated us, tricked the rabbi into converting them. They converted, and all they wanted to do was move to Israel and overthrow the government. But there was only one person. They didn't do a very good job, and Israel didn't let them in. But you still couldn't take away their Judaism. So the idea of overthrow the government has existed. But what about us today? Is there ever a time that we should overthrow the government, an unjust government, right? That there's an unjust government, and how should we do it? Is there a way to overthrow the government? So here it goes. I'm going to give you some sources. Pirkei Avot, Okay, so Pirkei Avot, this is the Talmud 2,000 years ago. Here it is. Let me see. Oh, there's one. Avot, Pirkei Avot, chapter 3, verse 2. Government is a necessary evil. You're stuck with government, whether you like it or not. The quote is, pray for the welfare of the government. We, as Jews, should pray for the welfare of the non-Jewish government, because if not, for fear of it, people would swallow one another alive. It's a necessary evil to keep order in the world. We have a prayer for our country where we pray for the leaders of our people. It was funny, the prayer books, we keep on changing prayer books, right? And so if you've looked closely at the prayer book from Silverman to Sim Shalom, from the little black one to the big blue one, we're already on the small blue one, but I'm going from the black Silverman to the big Sim Shalom. The prayer for our country changed. I don't know if anyone noticed. I didn't mention this in any of my classes on the new prayer book. It changed from, in the prayer for our country, the Silverman says, we pray for the leader of our country. But by the time the Sim Shalom came along, everyone was so angry about the leader of our country that they stopped saying that prayer. They're like, oh, we're not going to say the prayer for our country. So it was like you had a rabbi once who was leaving and they stopped saying the prayer for our congregation. they would sit up there and refuse to say the prayer for our congregation because they weren't happy with you. But the prayer for our country used to say in Silverman, we pray for the leader. The new Sim Shalom, the one we've been using, says pray for the leaders of our country. So you can kind of like, okay, I like that one, and I don't like that one. Not my president. So the idea is that in Pirkei Avot, we do pray for the government of who's running us. In Pirkei Avot, chapter 2, verse 3, the first one's 3, verse 2, and 2:3, be cautious, here it goes, but we don't like them. They're just necessary. Be cautious when dealing with the authorities because they only befriend a person for their own advantage. Okay? They're not good people. They're just, we're stuck with them. They act like friends when it suits them 2,000 years ago. They act like friends when it suits them, but when they don't stand by they don't stand by a person in his times of trouble. All right? So, government, the government will be nice to you as long as they get something out of you. So no government is truly good. We should pray for the government, but not because they're good, because we need it. Now, there's a term, Don Selig would always quote this in our Talmud class, Dina D'Malchut Dina. I don't know if anyone has heard it. Raise your hand now. Oh, thank you, Carol. Huh? Very good. I had got a ringer here. Carol just added Dina D'Malchut Dina. The law of the land is the law. That's why I got Dean a few times. That's the law. We're a minority people. We live among laws that are not our own. So we have a rule in Judaism. It's a Jewish law. The law of the land is the law. All right? I love when Jews say to me, oh, I can give my kid alcohol at 13 because they're an adult. I said, not according to Jewish law, not according to American law. If you are living in America, you have to follow American law. That's Jewish law. The Dina D'Malchut Dina. And the Talmud, this is 2,000 years ago again, the Talmud and Baba Batra, which it says it a few times in the Talmud, requires us to obey civil law. We must obey the law as a religious obligation. We have a religious obligation to follow civil law. We must pay our taxes. We must observe the speed limit, and to break the speed limit is to break Jewish law. Crazy to think that way, but that's Jewish law.
I broke the law today.
You broke the law today? I didn't drive much, but I probably would have if I could have. Okay, but here's the real question. That's simple. It's simple to say we should follow the laws of the land. What happens when the laws of the land aren't good laws or dangerous laws or against Jewish law? Right? What if the law of the land is eat pork? So okay, we'll talk about it. But what if secular law impedes our performance of God's mitzvot? What if the laws of the land stop us from following God's laws? Romans, and we're new to, it's not new to us. Romans prohibited the study of Torah sometimes. So if you follow that law, you're breaking Jewish law. But Rabbi Akiva, now this is going to be important. This theme you're going to hear right now, you'll be able to articulate it when we're done tonight. But what Rabbi Akiva does is kind of important. Romans prohibited the study of Torah, but Rabbi Akiva continued to teach publicly. He broke the law, right? When asked why, he responded with a parable about a fish, because, rabbis got to say something, different. In the water, here's what he said. Why do you keep teaching Torah when it's against the law? And Romans don't like, they're not very happy when you break the law. In the water, the fish, they might be in danger of the fishermen's nets, but they'd be in much bigger danger, trouble on land. Similarly with Torah, the Jews might be in danger from the Romans, but they'd be in much bigger danger without Torah. So he felt that, breaking God's law, he'd rather make the Romans mad than God mad. So how does he's not overthrowing the government, but what is he doing with, a bad government, bad laws? He's not following it. Now, he's not following it publicly. He's putting himself in danger, but he's not following the law. Now, you can violate, so now Judaism does tell us we can violate civil laws that equal to government persecution. Let's see. Heidi, you're in my Wednesday morning class. Anyone else in my Wednesday morning class? I don't know. Can't see. Okay. But in my Wednesday morning class, we just had the book of Daniel. And the book of Daniel, there's, they made rules about having to bow down. And we saw that with Haman too. So they didn't bow down to the king because, Jews don't bow down. So in the biblical book of Daniel in Babylonia, we saw that there's a civil law that violates that we consider government persecution. At the Jews at the time of Hanukkah, again, were being persecuted. Marranos, right? The Marranos during the Spanish Inquisition, Jews in Europe during the pogroms and the Holocaust, obviously. So here's the answer in the Talmud. If the intention of a law is to persecute the Jews, right? There we do know of laws, right? Quota laws and laws that limit our where we can be and how we can work and live. If the intention of a law is to persecute the Jews, we're not allowed to acquiesce to even the smallest concession. We should break that law. Is that overthrowing the government? No, it's breaking the law, but we are taught sometimes to break the law. The Talmud continues in 33b of Shabbat. We're actually studying this. We're not on 33b yet. One time, while discussing, this is actually kind of cute. Three rabbis. You want to talk about three rabbis, three opinions? Get ready for this one. One time, while discussing their Roman occupiers, so these are three rabbis talking about the Romans, Rabbi Yehuda praised the Romans' works. Rabbi Shimon criticized their motivations, and Rabbi Yossi expressed no opinion at all. Three rabbis. It turns out that their conversation was overheard by a government spy informant who reported it. That's not going to be good for some of them. The Romans authorities rewarded Rabbi Yehuda for his praise, right? He praised the government. Okay. They sought to kill Rabbi Shimon for his criticism, and they exiled Rabbi Yossi because they weren't big fans of political detachment, figuring if you're not with us, you're against us. So one of them got away, said something nice. The one said bad. One who said nothing at all, he was also in trouble. So the idea here is that Judaism has always lived under government, some good, some bad. We're taught that we should, could, would, must break laws that we must break a civil law if it tells us to break Jewish law. So once upon a time, but this is different than what we have today, because once upon a time, governments were, with rare exceptions, absolute monarchies. There's a difference today. So back, what I'm describing is times when we lived under absolute monarchies, whether it's Pharaoh or the Romans, okay? But in America, we supposedly live in a democracy, all right? Or, representative government, fine. But we supposedly live in a democracy. And so what's the difference? In an absolute monarchy, your courses of action are limited, what you can do. Overthrowing the government is not really a good, one of your choices. Overthrow the government's not easy in an absolute monarchy. And it's not called for just because you don't like the rightful government. You need more than that. You need a life at stake. We've talked about in Judaism before that the only reason you can kill is to protect your own life or to protect an innocent life, but not because they made you eat a hamburger. Yeah, so the idea is you can't just not like the rightful government. It's okay, and we're also taught in the Torah and the Bible, it's okay to speak the truth to power. throughout the Bible, Book of Kings, Samuel, Jeroboam spoke the truth to King Solomon, told him he was doing wrong. But obviously, if you're going to tell an absolute monarch that they're doing wrong, it comes with some implicit risks, right? If you're going to, Rabbi Akiva says, I'm going to still teach Torah, even though Romans said no, there's a risk involved there. All right, so you're going to see this throughout this talk tonight, is that you should, or maybe even could, or maybe must put yourself at risk, but it's also you're putting only yourself at risk. Okay, so there is risks to speaking the truth to an absolute monarch. In extreme cases, secession is an option. There's another option. Neil walked in here and said, what did you say? Civil war? I'm going to secede. What did you say?
Lebanon should secede.
Okay, so Neil walks in and says Mount Lebanon should secede from Pittsburgh?
Lebanon.
From Mount Lebanon? Okay, so Mount Lebanon,
should secede.
right. So secession is an option. I mean, you would need a good group of people, but if you don't like the government and had a choice or had an option, secession is an option. The 10 tribes left the 12 tribes in the first book of Kings, chapter 7. The tribe of Ephraim went to war against the national government in Judges 12. We might call that a civil war. That is another option. I think the closest I could think as I was preparing for this about what it means to overthrow the government is a civil war. If your own people are overthrowing your government, we call it a coup, a civil war. All right. Other tribes all declared war on Binyamin, another tribe in Judges 20. Secession, is it overthrowing? No. A secession is just leaving. You can leave, right? Neil and I said we're going to Canada if anything goes bad here. Some of you are going to go to Israel. God bless you. And and some are going to Mexico. We'll be in Canada. Okay. But so secession, leaving, is not the same as overthrowing, but civil war, I would say, is overthrowing. A coup is overthrowing. But here's the deal in Judaism. You never can assassinate a king. That's not within Jewish law. We know that a Jew killed Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. That was frowned upon. I know there are people who still support the guy, and there's even a political party now in Israel that supports them because Israel's a true democracy. You don't want that. Do you think we are a mess? Got to see what Israel's on the 5th elections in, I don't know, 5 minutes. But the idea here is we are never allowed to assassinate. Murder is prohibited, even if you don't like the guy, and rarely brings about the desired result. Now you could say it's self-defense, protecting the innocent, but assassination is usually frowned upon. King David, he was the anointed king, but Saul was refusing to leave the kingship. I don't know if anyone studied Saul and David. So King David and Saul, Saul was losing his mind. He really hated David. But King David refused to assassinate King Saul, despite multiple opportunities and the fact that Saul was actively trying to kill him. So Saul was trying to kill him all the time. It was a mess. And by the way, Saul's son was King David's best friend. So it was a triangle. So King David felt that it would set a bad precedent as a king to assassinate the last king. And history has kind of shown that, by the way. In the book of Kings, most of the rulers who ascended the throne by assassination, guess what happened to them? They were assassinated, right? We all know this from Game of Thrones, right? Because it went from the Game of Thrones to the Bible, right? Because there really is no difference. If you can either watch Game of Thrones on Sunday night on HBO, or you can read the Book of Kings in the Bible. They're the same thing. Lots of murder, bloodshed, and nudity. So nowadays in America, we do not live in an absolute monarchy. Even if you think whatever you think of our president, we don't live in an absolute monarchy. We supposedly live in a democracy, and the options for overthrowing the government are different. And what is our number one way of overthrowing the government in a democracy? Voting, right? Good job, John. You see, Carol, you're not the only one. Okay. Yeah, I know you did. You were being nice. Yeah, you cheated. Okay, so voting, right? Vote. Rabbis are not allowed to tell you who to vote for, right? We could lose our 501k something or other status. but we can tell you to vote. All right. And we can tell you to vote the right way, choose wisely. Jewish law considers voting to be an obligation, a Jewish law to vote. All right. Now, there are famous rabbis, and these are more modern. We're going to move from 2,000 years ago to 1980s. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. So Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, you've heard me mention him before, if you listened to anything I've said in 20 years, the most famous Orthodox Jewish legal authority of the 20th century. Kind of ended in the 80s. So what does Moshe Feinstein say? Says, or he's gone, said, America gives us religious freedom. Voting represents a form of hakaras hatov, an obligation to express our gratitude for religious freedom by participating in the democratic process. It's a gift. Voting is a gift. And we take it for granted. Obviously, Americans take it for granted if you ever look at the percentage of people who vote. So 1980s ultra-Orthodox rabbi, the Stipler Gaon said, vote, and this guy was B'nai Brak, far right Orthodox rabbi. Voting is an obligation, a Jewish obligation, because of the need to fix the pressing matters in our society. We're not allowed to stand idly by the blood of our neighbor. We can't just stand. Remember the rabbi who said nothing? He still got in trouble. Judaism believes if you stand by, if you just let things happen, you are breaking Jewish law. So we have an obligation to fix the world, and we do so by voting. He even permitted a mourner, one who lost a loved one, to vote during the week of Shiva if the need proved urgent enough. So, this is a really Orthodox rabbi who says, leave your Shiva house and vote, and then go back and sit Shiva. 800 years ago, a German rabbi, the Maharam Mir-Rothenberg, ruled that when decisions cannot be reached by a consensus, all eligible voters are expected to step up and cast their ballots for the good of the community. That's 800 years ago. That's a little before America. 500 years ago, the Ramah is a famous rabbi. Okay. He's Moshe Isserles. He's the commentator of the Shulchan Aruch, wrote that all taxpayers are obligated to vote, and those who fail to do so forfeit their right to complain about the result. You know how many people complained about the election after it happened when they didn't vote? I find that fascinating. I have relatives who have a lot of complaints about elections, but don't vote. Yeah, so Jewish tradition would say you don't have a right to complain if you didn't vote. More specifically, he says that opinions of non-voters are nullified since we only follow the majority of those who actually vote. Right? You might say the majority of X wants something, but if only X amount vote, that's the majority of the X, not the true majority. So we can vote in Judaism and we can protest. All right, so that's another form. I'm not going to say overthrowing. We're going to talk about violence, but we can vote. And we can protest. Judaism may even say we have to protest, but protesting, right? If you're protesting in the time of the Romans, protesting can get you in trouble. All right, so there is some questions. Judaism believes in civil disobedience. All right, so civil disobedience, if you've studied anything, and civil disobedience, what is that? Jewish tradition allows Jews to protest and engage in civil disobedience, provided that these activities are non-violent. So you're starting to hear a theme here, and that's non-violence. You can protest, you might get yourself killed protesting, but violence is not for us. And provided that the protesters are willing, this is really interesting. I'm going to read this sentence slowly. Jewish tradition allows Jews to protest and engage in civil disobedience, provided that these activities are nonviolent, and provided that the protesters are willing to suffer the consequences, such as imprisonment. So you should know, if you're going to protest, that you may be putting yourself in danger, and that's not against Jewish law. But it's not the same as throwing your, neighbors or other relatives under the bus. So if you can protest as long as you're willing to take, whatever comes at you. And for many people, protesting has inherent risks. You can imagine. Jewish law and tradition have a positive attitude toward protesting. I know you're never going to believe this, but there are Jews who complain. I know. I'm not, Paul, I'm telling you, there are Jews who complain, and protesting is actually supported in Judaism. One of our first protesters was Abraham. to God. In Genesis chapter 18, Sodom and Gomorrah, Abraham protests against God and said about destroying Sodom and Gomorrah. Shall the judge of all the earth not deal justly? All right. Now, yeah, who knows? I mean, it's God. I mean, talk about protesting and putting your life in your own hands. God could have just, flicked them away, but God gave in. We should protest injustice, right? We've always said this. Jews should protest injustice, even with knowing that there's inherent risks in protesting. What does it say in the Talmud? This is good. Whoever can protest to his household and does not is accountable for the sins of his household, right? You know something's going on in your house, you say nothing, it's your fault. If he could protest to his townspeople, okay, Mount Lebanon, he's accountable for their sins. If he could protest to the whole world, he's accountable for the whole world. You can't stand idly by. If you see injustice, you must speak out, even though you might be getting yourself in trouble. The Talmud continues. Reish Lakish, one of my favorite rabbis, used to be a thief. Reish Lakish rebuked the patriarch Rabbi Judah Nasi, who then issued a warrant for his arrest. So Reish Lakish complained issued a warrant for his arrest. Reish Lakish fled. In the end, they were reconciled. They hugged and made up. But Reish Lakish said to Rabbi Judah, "Did you think that for the fear of you, I would stop proclaiming the teaching of God? I put God before human, even though I could be arrested." According to Gandhi, and Gandhi is another topic, he said some things we don't love about Jews, but don't worry about that. Stick to the good Gandhi that you saw in movies, okay, with, was it Ben Kingsley? Yeah, so stick to that Gandhi. According to Gandhi, it still works Jewishly. According to Gandhi, one who resorts to civil disobedience obeys the laws of the state in which he belongs, not out of fear of sanctions, but because he considers them to be good for the welfare of society. But there comes occasions, generally rare, when he considers certain laws to be so unjust as to render obedience to them a dishonor. He then openly and civilly breaks them and quietly suffers the penalty for the breach. So you can protest, but you have to be ready to accept whatever comes at you. You might get arrested. You might get imprisoned. You might get killed. Civil disobedience in Israel. So we do have examples of civil disobedience in Israel in history. In the first book of Kings, we are told Obadiah revered the Lord greatly. When Jezebel was killing off the prophets of the Lord, Jezebel, you don't want to name your daughter Jezebel. Just, had this guy, he's like, I can't name my daughter Bathsheba, which was really is Elizabeth, by the way. Because, she got in trouble with King David. I said, it's not her fault. Shouldn't name your kid David. All right. So when Jezebel was killing off the prophets of the Lord, Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hidden them. So now he's hiding, he's kind of the righteous Gentile for this story, right? He's hiding the prophets who are going to be killed by the queen. Obadiah had taken 100 prophets, hidden them, 50 to a cave, and provided them with food and drink. In other words, Obadiah feared the Lord more than he feared the wicked King Ahab and Queen Jezebel, who were Jewish, actually. He saved 100 prophets at the risk of his own life. When King David and his men fled from King Saul, we still love that King David Saul, they received provisions from Abimelech. Fine, I think you're going to get that. I'm skipping, because, I've been talking for 34 minutes. They did not take up arms. I'm skipping. Maimonides. Okay, let's go to my last page. Okay, so Maimonides discusses our issue in the Mishnah Torah. So Maimonides, famous rabbi, people, we're not here without Maimonides. So not a great husband. But Maimonides discusses our issue in his Mishnah Torah. A person who annuls the decree of a king because he was engaged in performing a mitzvah, so you're now going to break the king's rule for God, even a minor mitzvah is not liable. You're not breaking Jewish law. The words of the master, God, and the words of the servant, the king, the words of the master take precedence. And there's no need to say that if the king decreed to annul a mitzvah, one does not listen to him. So we do believe that when American law, when the civil law tells us to break Jewish law, we're not supposed to follow it. But it doesn't say overthrow the government, it says we should break that law. Thus, if a king or state orders a Jew to desecrate the Shabbat or to eat pig, it was back then, or to transgress a commandment, the Jew should refuse, since the words of God take precedence over the words of the king and the state. So we're taught, I don't know if it's taught to overthrow, but we're taught to break the law if it breaks our law. However, all such activities must be nonviolent, since we are not allowed to strike one another. According to the Midrash, Rabbi Yitzchak says, whoever hits his fellow is called a rasha, an evil person. Maimonides ruled that whoever hits his fellow transgresses a negative commandment. Here it is, my last paragraph. Rabbi David DeLincoln, he was, not anymore, but he was the dean of the rabbinical school in Israel. He was my Talmud teacher, didn't like me, but he was a good teacher. Okay, so I feel bad for him. He just didn't understand, that I was a good guy. Okay, so Rabbi David Lincoln was the dean of the rabbinical school in Israel in the late 90s, and this is his conclusion about civil disobedience. Okay, in conclusion, I believe that Jewish law and tradition permit nonviolent protest and civil disobedience, provided that those who engage in these actions are willing to face the consequences of their actions. So you asked me a question, can we overthrow the government? I don't think so. I'm pretty sure you can't overthrow the government because we can leave. That we live in a place where we can actually leave. So that's a big difference. 2, we can protest. And number 3, most importantly, we can vote. But Judaism, and if there's a law that we don't like, we could break it or protest, and as long as we're willing to take the consequences, but we shouldn't take others down with us. That's a personal choice. That is the big question for tonight. Okay, 8:07. I could take 23 minutes of questions and before I turn into a pumpkin. So people on Zoom, you do have the ability to unmute yourselves. Okay, and like Paul, did you unmute yourself on purpose?
Yes. So now I'm totally confused because at one point the law of the land. Now, the law of the land is the law. Then a little bit later, no, the law of the land isn't the law, because if it goes against Jewish principles, we go by the Jewish principles.
Right. So you are not confused. So you are not confused. There's so many Jewish jokes like that. Yeah, that's the answer. The answer is you're confused. No, it's the answer is the law of the land is the law, unless read the fine print, unless it tells us to break Jewish law. If it tells us to break Jewish law, most rabbis traditionally would say, don't break the law. I have a thing where, like, if someone put a gun to your head, well, certainly that's risking your life. That's pikuach nefesh. But if someone put a gun to your head and said, eat this cheeseburger, my answer is always eat the cheeseburger, but don't ask for seconds. Go ahead.
But the whole idea as to why that expression, the law of the land is the law, came about because Jewish law at times ran counter to the law of the land. And that saying came about to say that the law of the land supersedes Jewish law. Right? That's why that saying came about.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that it came about because some people, some Jews, think they only have to follow Jewish law and not the law of the land. I'm not just talking about taxes and paying and speeding. That's the two I brought up. But I get this all the time. I'm trying to think. Okay, marijuana. Okay, so let's just back in the old days when marijuana was illegal. And kids would always ask me, like, I go to the Catholic high school and they go, what's the Jewish view of marijuana? And back when it was easy to answer, the answer was very simple. Marijuana is against Jewish law because it's against American law back then, in the good old days. That is an example of, it's not a Jewish law. Jewish law doesn't say don't smoke marijuana, but American law does, or whatever law I can't figure it out anymore. But back then,
that whole expression,
go ahead.
So the whole expression, the law of the land is the law, is not to mean that the law of the land supersedes Jewish law. Quite the contrary. If there is a butting of heads, the Jewish law supersedes the law of the land. Correct.
The law of the land is the law. It has nothing to do with Jewish law. It's unless there's an unless part, unless it tells us to break Jewish law. And there's like other than me who says, eat the cheeseburger. The rabbis kind of agree, break American law, but like a Rabbi Akiva, there was a difference between Rabbi Akiva and the normal person too. We have stories of Akiva, flaunting, studying the Torah publicly. But some rabbis would say, don't put if you're going to put your life at risk, you're breaking now you're breaking a Jewish law, and that's putting your life at risk. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff in Jewish law that says, do whatever it takes to keep yourself alive, because, if you die, you can't celebrate any more Shabbats. So better to break one Shabbat so you can have more Shabbats. So, but you're right, Paul. The very first part, the law of the land is the law, is purely about everything but breaking Jewish law. And then the Jewish law does supersede. But I'm also going to put a caveat on that. If you're putting your life at risk, Rabbi Akiva, there are many people that thought Rabbi Akiva did wrong, right? Rabbi Akiva was told, don't, do Torah, and he's publicly teaching Torah. He's a great guy until he is burned alive, roasted in front of his students. He's famous for saying the Shema before he dies. Yeah.
So if I remember correctly, and I don't remember it all correctly, when your life is at stake, you are to eat the pork sandwich, do whatever, with about 3 exceptions. And I forget what those exceptions are. One of them is denouncing God, or hurting somebody else.
Murdering, if someone says, like the movie Seven, if you murder someone or I'll murder you, you should get murdered. Raping and idolatry, which is our next class. What's so bad about idolatry? But those are the 3. But that's my problem. In a lot of these stories, you'll have someone breaking the law, and you remember the story, any of you grew up with Hannah and her sons, and each one is killed in front of her, because they won't, eat the pig or something. Most Jew or Masada, right? We'd rather die than be taken alive. Most of Jewish law, there was a difference between the leader. The leader is supposed to die, right? But not like the normal person. There was if the leader does it and leads all these other people to break law, it's different than, if the normal person does. All right, Neil, you put this class. What do you got?
So
I'll repeat the question, by the way, if you can't hear it.
Hypothetically,
Okay.
that Pennsylvania passes a law that bans circumcision.
Okay, good. Because
Not unreasonable.
Right, because I was in Copenhagen and they were passing a law that was going to make circumcision against the law. And even if you took your child to another country, and you came back, you can still get arrested.
So would you do brisses?
Would I do brisses, like in secret, kind of thing? So Jewish law would tell me I'm still supposed to circumcise, right? I should break American law to do it. The problem is, is my life at stake for doing it?
Let's say there's a $10,000 fine.
Right, $10,000 fine. My wife would kill me. Is that protecting my life if my wife would kill me for a $10,000 fine? No, so the answer is Jewish law would probably say we should still circumcise in secret. However, Leah, you're next. I see your hand. However, it's a tough one. If they start, that's a really good example, because we're seeing that throughout the world, this banning of circumcision. But Jewish law would probably say we're supposed to break it secretly, and take our chances. It's because there's an example. The law of the land is certainly breaking Jewish law, and we also think that law is anti-Semitic. Remember, that's really going into an anti-Semitic law too. So it's a tough one. Again, we have other options. We can move, right? Your example. First, you can move. Get out of Pittsburgh.
Are you going to move because of circumcision? Probably not.
Probably not, but Jewish law might say you should, right? Don't live in a land that doesn't allow circumcision. Or you can protest, you can vote, or you can break the law and accept the consequences. And now, it doesn't really say you should break the law and flaunt it, that's a good example that could happen one day somewhere. That is something that's on the books all over the place. That usually doesn't have a lot of, since everyone here is circumcised for now. Leah Lampo, I'm coming to you. I saw your hand raised. I see you. Here we go. We can hear you now.
Okay. I want to use as an example about Jewish law. I was at shul during the holidays where Yom Kippur, when we fast, and someone in the sanctuary, a gentleman, I believe, collapsed from not, because he had been fasting. And one of the members of the shul is a physician, and he quickly yelled for water to give to this gentleman who had passed out.
Right.
And there was discrepancies among some of the people. And my comment to them was, God has never asked us to sacrifice our life for a glass of water or anything that was going to be easy enough to save our life from starvation or thirst or hunger, if at all possible. So God has never asked us, to my knowledge and my schooling, to sacrifice that. That's only something that we intellectually have assumed here, there, and so on. So I believe very strongly that God would not ask us to sacrifice unless it was in saving our life, our own life, or that of another human being. But other than that, I think that's how I think and believe.
You know, it's so funny you bring this up, Leah. I spoke at Concordia this morning. So that after service.
Oh, yes, I was there.
Right. So at Concordia, I had this talk about the environment, but there's a line that I forgot this morning. I knew I had a whole thing ready, but I did without paper. And there's a line I forgot, and it's called Chai Bahem. It's two Hebrew words. Chai, like l'chaim, life. Chai Bahem in them. It's okay. So Chai Bahem is a line in the Torah that says, these laws I make, you shall live by them. Live by them. Chai Bahem. And so the idea here is what Leah just said is exactly how most rabbis look at Jewish law. Jewish law is made to live by, not to die by. And the overthrow the government thing, you could see was kind of going into it. And even your questions are, can we break this law or that law? But if you can live by it, and certainly if drinking water, obviously I'm trying to start a trend of drinking water on Yom Kippur, because and the walls have not paved in yet. No lightning has struck me, but I do that because God's laws are made to live by, not to die by. Just as Leah said very articulately, that we live by the law. Thank you. And it's Chai Bahem. And that is kind of like an answer for it was an answer for this morning's class that was on actually taking care of the environment. And it's on tonight's class about overthrowing the government. You can protest and you can secede, but the law was made to live by. And Paul's question, when the two laws fight with each other, if it's something that that could put us to death, then live by them would overrule the Jewish law, right? Leah's issue is really about when Jewish law is almost dangerous, right? And sometimes some of our laws can be dangerous. Okay, questions. Neil, hit me.
Can I take the last question, or is there anybody else?
No, we have time for more questions. Hit me another. We have 11 minutes before I fall asleep.
Be about, I've been watching the January 6th committee.
Oh, God in heaven. Why are you watching the January 6th committee?
It's fascinating.
I know. Fine, go ahead.
I'm a guy who listens to Supreme Court cases.
Now that I like the Supreme Court cases, but go on about that.
All right, so what got me most, I think, about it is that clearly Trump was talking to Michael Flynn about the idea of, three-star general who was talking about martial law.
Yeah.
First, it just bothered me about how does the military produce a guy like this? But more than that, so what you're saying is the Jewish answer, if we had martial law,
okay,
which in this scenario could have happened, would be we can protest it.
We can protest it. We might get arrested.
Consequences.
Right.
We can leave.
Now, if protesting could lead to death, if they changed martial law and said that anyone who's protesting can be called treasonous and can be killed, then maybe not. Go on. You can leave.
You could leave the country.
Right. You can go. Yeah.
voting would be pretty hard.
Voting at the time, right? We're not in Europe and in Israel. You can vote. You can call for a vote of no
One would
confidence.
say that if we were going to have this kind of rerun election under martial law,
Right, you mentioned this to me. Yeah.
the president, Trump would have somehow miraculously. I mean, this is right out of a Philip Roth book.
Yes. If we had a new election, right?
Right. So,
This is what we did when I moved here. We would have a ritual committee, and whenever the ritual committee decided something that the board didn't like, they would say, vote again. And the ritual committee would say, are we just supposed to keep voting until it's the right answer? And the answer was yes. So yes, we would.
so my point is, voting wouldn't be an option.
Right.
Moving would be. Protesting would probably be pretty dangerous.
Right. Dangerous. Okay.
So my question is, I feel like you'd be pretty boxed in that situation.
Yeah. I go back to that Civil War concept, right? I mean, God help this country, right? Well, I was talking to my kid last night, and he said, "Did you know that Hitler won with 30% of the vote?" It's kind of like Netanyahu wins with 30% of the vote. 70% of the people in Israel voted against Netanyahu. But the way a democracy works, if you have 25 people running for president, no one gets 50%, no one gets 51%, no one gets 40%. When you have so many people running, 30% wins an election, right? We don't have that here, but it's a wonderful experience. So
actually, in the US, it'd be interesting because with the electoral college, you have to hit a certain minimum.
right. Well,
So
they changed the minimum in
yeah.
Israel. Was a big thing.
Right.
It used to be 1% of vote gets a seat, and then they moved to the 3% of the vote gets a seat, which got rid of some of the smaller people. But it also got some people to join together who were more dangerous. But the idea here is that, we look at our country, people make fun of our country, or we make fun of another country. It's a 49%. What is our country at? 48, 49%, one side, 50, 51, the other, right? It's pretty evenly divided, unfortunately, but it's not, you couldn't draw a line, right? It's based on rural and urban a lot. But in these other places, these people went for 30% of the vote, where the majority didn't vote for that person. We're not, it's a very different, democracy can be very scary. So, could we start a secession? We brought up secession a few times, and I don't see overthrow the government. What does it mean? Does it mean civil war, assassination, coup? Like, how do you overthrow a government? You have to,
Well,
it can't be done peacefully, can it?
You can't vote. And you can't, if you can't vote
Yeah.
and there's martial law, your options are very limited.
Yeah.
I think in the end, the more I think about it, the only thing I can't think would be to move.
Unfortunately, and what do Jews do?
We move.
Anyone coming to my Hungarian Jews, 9 Jews thing? There's 9 Jews, and they've moved 150 times, right? Like, each Jew has moved from Budapest to Vienna to Austria to Hungary to France to Berlin. They all went to Berlin at one point, but America, London. So that is kind of our people's plight. Again, we put down our arms a long time ago. We're not really built for overthrowing any governments. There's always people wanting to kill us and blame it on us anyway.
For all the talk, I can't see myself. In fact, it's interesting what you say, because no, I could never see myself taking up arms,
Right.
and I could never see myself going invading the Capitol.
Yeah.
And I don't think there were any Jews, I bet, who actually invaded the Capitol on January 6th. It's just not our way.
And there's something I didn't bring up tonight because it's just too disturbing, because I can't see myself moving either. If you're going through the options, I don't like any of the options, right? So I knew you're going to bring up something like the circumcision one's great, by the way, but a government that should be overthrown. What do you do? We know that there were Jews who supported the German government at the time. thinking that, oh, it's, Hitler was just trying to, he didn't really believe what he was going to say. He said it, but, there were Jews who voted for Hitler because, they thought he was good for Germany and that he wasn't going to follow through. There's, some politicians say crazy things when they're, campaigning that they're just doing it to get elected. Nick Netanyahu is famous for saying really crazy things the morning of an election.
The guy who's running for governor right now.
Huh?
The guy who's running.
For governor, right? Because it's hard to believe some of the things these comes out of their mouths, but they get the votes they needed. So there was this group. I mean, if you're a proud German, and Germany was, after World War I, and what happened in Germany after World War I, and you're a proud German. It's hard to just say I'm going to leave too, and so we don't have a lot of good choices. Okay, questions. I see people. Any hands up that I missed down there? Okay, anyone in here? Paul.
Yeah. So to pick on one thing that's really controversial, which is Roe versus Wade being overturned, I'm not aware of a single rabbi that is happy with that, even though there's a wide diversity among rabbis and among the movements in terms of when abortion is appropriate. The one thing that they all seem to agree on is that in certain situations, it's either appropriate or, according to the Orthodox, even required, pekua nefesh, the life of a mother being more important, the life of a pregnant woman being more important than the potential life or not complete life of the fetus. So, but politics aside, have you heard of a single rabbi who said, well, thank God they passed that they overturned Roe versus Wade? This is what we've been waiting for.
Yes, I do. I have congregants in our synagogue, and I also know rabbis. Because I'm on a lot of lists. Now, by the way, I do not support the overturning Roe versus Wade, but no, I can find rabbis who support anything. I have a group of rabbis. Yeah, they're not very popular in the conservative movement. Again, conservative. I'm not even talking about like other movements, but in the conservative movement, there are a group of rabbis who support any single thing that you think that we all agree on. And pretty much what I'm talking about is the conservative right. So there is a conservative right. The country has become so right. The country has become so extreme on both sides that all the things that we think that there's no other side because you have a rabbi who is a little liberal, but I do know of rabbis. One time, a congregant came up to me when Trump was running for president, the first time, and she said to me, "You need to go onto the bima and explain why you can't vote. It's against Jewish law to vote for Trump." And I said to her, I go, but what if I was a rabbi who believed that Trump should be president because Jewish law says we should vote for Trump? Because I knew rabbis who felt that way. And she didn't like that answer at all. But the idea is, yes, there are rabbis who support the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe versus Wade. When we sent out that thing saying we're not happy with the Supreme Court, I didn't just get praise. We did get people who are not happy that we said we didn't like the Supreme Court, and there are rabbis who actually support the Supreme Court. Again, they're not. You don't know them because they have trouble keeping their jobs in most places. But not all places. We're just in Mount Lebanon. So it's different. If there was a synagogue there's not as many synagogues in Westmoreland County, but think about how many places if we had a synagogue somewhere in Pennsylvania other than Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, you can imagine in Du Bois. The Du Bois rabbi probably would have to say something different. Okay, Leah and Irv. I don't know whose hand that is, but Leah then Irv. Leah, you got something?
Okay. I just wanted to bring this issue up that I read it in the prayer book, and it really made me think, and I was proud that I was a Jew. And that is that the quote they use for an example is, "Do not boil the baby animal in its mother's milk." And to me, that meant everything. That the mother was the mother, the child was of its own body, and the insensitivity of boiling an animal in its mother's milk hit me. I was so proud of being a Jew when I read that. I thought that answered so many questions that I had in the past.
And the irony of what Leah just said is, I completely agree with Leah that the do not boil a baby goat in its mother's milk is completely about ethics and how horrible to boil something in its own mother's milk. And yet, what did Judaism do? No cheeseburgers. That's the law that got us no cheeseburgers. Even though God never says don't eat a cheeseburger, God says do not boil a baby goat in its mother's milk, which seems to me to be ethical. No, showing cruelty to animals. So Leah, I read it the same way you do. And yet I still don't eat cheeseburgers. Okay, unless they're impossible, then they're good. Okay, Joan and Irv, what do you got?
A question of which civil versus Jewish law. A woman lives in a state that has outlawed abortion for any reason, and including making it illegal for anybody to help that person to get an abortion going elsewhere. The woman unexpectedly becomes pregnant. She's a high-risk pregnancy, which if she continues the pregnancy threatens her life. She asks someone to drive her out of state to get an abortion.
Yeah.
Which takes precedence, civil law or Jewish law to preserve a life?
It's easy for me to say because I'm not the one in that position, but Jewish law would say you should break that law, protect the woman's life. Remember that even if you get arrested. Now, it might be different if we said that if you're caught transporting a pregnant woman across state boundaries, or that you'll be put to death. But remember, we already said that imprisonment and fines might be Jewish law would supersede, right? And by the way, that's a Jewish law. Abortion, the mother's life at stake. Again, is it physical life or not? Physical life would be something, but yeah. Irv, the answer is very simple. The Jewish answer would be to hide the mother or whatever. This happened a lot right in the beginning of the immigration debate. Synagogues started questioning, should they hide immigrants? Right? Since there's a Jewish law to protect the immigrant. And so, there were synagogues that were sanctuaries, like think about the word sanctuary, like, Quasimodo. And, there were, and so their idea was, Jewish law does tell us, this is back to Paul's question, when American law or whatever law we're living in tells us to break Jewish law comes first and we should break the law, but we have to know the consequences. Again, I think that's important. You can't act like if you get caught, you're going to go to jail, you're going to get fined. I don't know what happens to these people, but so I do support, if you can find a way to get that woman that you just explained, gave us a doctor, whatever, cross lines, because the one thing when I say you can just leave the state, that's good for rich white people, but there's a lot of people can't just pick up and leave, where they live and move somewhere else. There is a different, not everyone can just pick up and leave. Because obviously there's going to be a lot of people in a lot of states who wish they were in some other state. Yeah.
Well, let me take that. Sorry, go ahead.
All right, Neil and then Heidi, or Heidi and then Neil. Heidi then Neil.
You said a lot of rich white people
Yeah.
do that, but those who are not rich and white, and I have to disagree with that statement.
Okay.
Just because they're white doesn't mean that they're rich.
No.
Vice versa. So I think you need to be careful on how you make that statement.
That is true, but there are. The concept of just picking up and leaving and moving is really something that not everyone can do.
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
Not that all rich white people can pick up and move.
No.
That I disagree with.
Well, perhaps all rich white people can, but not all white people are rich. I never said that. And not all rich people are white.
Five rich white people, whatever. What I'm getting at is the fact that implying that whether you're white or non-white, you still could be in a position where you cannot move.
That's
You can't pick up and just leave.
not if you don't have the money. Yeah, that's true. Neil, what do you got?
So let's say We haven't had a fun board meeting lately, so.
A board meeting.
Yeah, that's fun. So what happens if somebody came to the board meeting and said, we want to, Ohio has banned abortion.
Uh-huh.
And
And we want to open an
Pennsylvania-
abortion clinic at Bethel
No,
for Ohio.
I
Oh,
won't go
sorry.
that far. That's not what's wrong.
I don't mind. Yeah, I'd support it, but go on.
Let's say somebody said, we want to become a sanctuary. People could stay at Bethel
Alright.
who wanted to have an abortion in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I think that we'd be very famous. Yeah, it's and in that case, we wouldn't even, you're not even talking about breaking any law there, right? You're saying that they banned it in Ohio. That it would have been better if you said if they've been in Pittsburgh or Pennsylvania
No,
and we
so
did that.
People
We're
are
going to
coming
hide them
from
in our basement.
Ohio. Let's say even
Yeah,
coming from Idaho, just to make it easier.
yeah,
That says if you go, you're violating Idaho.
Right.
law.
right.
Um,
I have no problem with it, but of course, I don't run my synagogue based on what I want, because you don't want that, I believe in democracy.
I think there's a line that, I'm uncomfortable with the rabbi in Florida who's suing the government.
Oh, yeah.
And that he's
That's
saying that abortion violates.
I mean,
I
it's
think
cute.
it's a novel thing, but the
Right.
point is, I'm not
I
certain
agree.
a synagogue should become so political.
I don't disagree, especially, what I say about politics and synagogues is, so Chabad is a lot more right-wing Republican conservative, right? I had someone who left this synagogue, went there, but it was too far right for them. And now they're just have nothing. And then, Temple Emmanuel is going to be a lot more liberal. I'd say that when it comes to the conservative movement or the synagogue, we have both Democrats and Republicans. Now we have a lot more Democrats and Republicans, but we still have a percentage of Republicans here. And I'm proud of that. I don't want a synagogue that says, you have no place here. Yeah. So, that's the problem with the political statements is, sometimes you have to do the right thing. And even if it's going to make people mad, at the same time, I don't want to say that you don't have a place here. And I feel like that's more and more synagogues say that is to whoever, it's that you don't have a place here. So at the same time, your example, if these women needed to be protected and there was nowhere for them to go, then I think sometimes you have to, bite the bullet. But
It's ironic today because I see some of these things as being real possibilities that I would never
now,
think.
you hit me with that circumcision thing, and I do believe that's a possibility. Not right now, we got abortion, but that's a good example too. That we have examples of states that could change laws that put us in a position where we might have immigration at a certain point was also looking like that.
I would feel more comfortable doing abortion. I would feel more comfortable doing circumcisions because I feel it's so, it's the essence of our religion.
Yeah,
I'm not.
I think I'd be okay. I'd be better with abortions.
I would feel as comfortable.
We're gonna open up.
We'd cross a line that we don't know what would happen.
We have a big basement. We'll have one place for immigrants.
Basement.
Yeah, you see, you don't know. We call it the dungeon. We're gonna put immigrants in one room, protecting immigrants in one room, circumcisions in another, and abortions in another.
This building's amazing. There's always something new to find here.
Yeah, no, it's a scary world we live in, but I like to believe that we're not at that point yet. Yeah, it's keep voting. Yeah, it's
Prevent a civil war.
and then
I know
visit
where
me in
I'm hiding.
Toronto.
I'm going into
Yeah.
the dungeon.
keep voting, and then one day you'll meet me, and we'll all meet each other in Toronto. It's what show? Handmaid's Tale. That's so. All right. Well, it is 8:38. You guys woke up at the end, so good job. Don't overthrow the government if you can't really do it by yourself. And stay safe out there. Our next big questions, is it next week? 'Cause
Soon.
Huh? The 8th. That's not, bless you. That's in 2 weeks. 2 weeks, because this class got pushed up 2 weeks. It would have been a month apart. So 2 weeks from tonight, we're doing why paganism, what's so bad about idolatry, right? I think Paul's question, I'm always embarrassed when someone says to me, what are the 3 things? When Paul just did to me, what are the 3 things you can get yourself killed for? And I'm like, well, murder and rape and idolatry. Like I should die. I should let someone shoot me in the head before I worship an idol. Now, I don't know what it means to worship an idol. We're going to learn about that, but give me that idol. So it is September 8th. All
What
right,
day of the week is that?
it's gotta be Thursday. It's gotta be Thursday.
I'll be zooming in on that. I'll be.
You're
at the
zooming?
airport,
Okay.
flying home hopefully.
Those poor idolaters. All right. And it's funny, I actually changed the title because you said paganism. And the funny thing is, I get people all the time who come to me and say, I'm a pagan. No one says I'm idolater. Yeah. But people will come to me and say, hi, Rabbi, I'm a pagan. I'm thinking about being Jewish. I'm like, that's interesting. And yeah. So I realized I want to say idolatry because, no one ever says I'm a idolater,
Somebody be a pagan.
a pagan. We'll talk about it. I think they really mean like Wicca, there are things, we'll talk
Have
about
you
it.
ever had like a witch?
Yes,
You
I've
had a
had,
witch?
I've had 2 Wiccas come to me for conversion, yes.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, I attract them
What
all.
would you have them speak? Let me know who they are. I think that would be a great class.
I one time spoke at a hospital on end of life and they put me after the Wicca person. So,
Somebody who's like a witch, like who actually believed in.
well,
witchdom.
Wicca is the witchcraft thingy, but I don't think they call it. Well, did she call herself a witch? She might have. Okay, I'm tired. Let's go to bed and my battery's running out.
Delicious, man.
I know that I'll hit it next time.
Can they fly?
Wicca and witches will go into idolatry. I'm going to give you some of that next. You save your questions about witches to next time.
Oh, no.
All right. Okay. If you want to unmute yourselves and say hello, you can.
Do they